It's been a few weeks since I've done one, so I figured it was about high time I hopped on the good foot and did the bad thing and gave you an updated 2013 NFL mock draft. Now, keep in mind the premise of this mock for me, and you'll see it down in the description box down below. A couple of things. Number one, I'm not factoring in any trades. Number two, to save some time for myself this time, I only did one round. And number three, I am strictly focused on who, in my opinion, each team should take. Not necessarily who they would take or who they will take, but in my opinion, based off of the way the board would break down, based off of team needs or best player available, what have you, who I feel each team should take. Now, obviously, free agency and the offseason have impacted the structure of draft boards for several teams. Teams like Kansas City and Oakland, Miami, St. Louis. Those are just a few teams that the offseason is kind of, really put into better perspective where some of these teams are going to be looking at upcoming April NFL draft. Now, there are a few names that I want you to keep an eye on in the next month or so until we get to the end of April, until we get to that first day of the draft. Some names that you may be familiar with, some names that you might not be, but they're names you're going to need to pay attention to anyways because they may surprise you with where they end up getting drafted. The first one is going to be Tavon Austin, the wide receiver from West Virginia. While his teammate, quarterback Geno Smith, gets the most attention, it's Tavon Austin, who was a great playmaker at West Virginia the past couple of years and has really helped himself out with the draft workout process, combines, pro days. Tavon Austin has really made himself a lot of money in this draft offseason, if you will. From a guy who it was looking like the earliest he may potentially go would be, let's say, to Chicago at pick number 20, to the point now where it breaks my heart as a Bears fan, I view no possible scenario on God's green earth that he will even come close to that. Now, I have him going number 16 in this mock draft, but I don't think he's even going to drop that low. I do think that there is a distinct possibility that, and you know how this goes if you pay attention enough to the NFL draft every year, there is always that one pick, somewhere between number 6 and number 10, maybe usually between picks 8 and 10, something happens that just comes out of left field, and you're like, holy shit, we had this guy going in the 20s, or we had him going in the teens, and he's going pick 8 or pick 9 or pick 10. I would not be surprised at all to see Tavon Austin go pick number 9 to the New York Jets. I would not be surprised to see him go maybe even as high as pick number 6 to the Cleveland Browns. And the reason for that is in a draft where the talent between, let's say, pick 5 or pick 6 and pick 26, there's not a whole lot of separation. Teams are going to probably side with athleticism and playmaking ability and upside, of which Tavon Austin brings that in great abundance. And he can in part thank people such as Randall Cobb and Percy Harvin for also helping to bump up his own draft stock, a guy who could do a lot of damage out of the slot, do different things on the offensive side of the football, and also be an impact player in the return game. So if Tavon Austin gets drafted in the top 10 in April, I will not be surprised at all. And you might say, well, he's a bit small and this and that, so there'd be durability questions, what have you. But when you look at explosiveness, you look at playmaking ability, I would not be surprised if somebody took him in the top 10, and I would be hard-pressed to knock anybody for taking him in the top 10. Jonathan Cooper, the offensive guard/center from North Carolina. The reason I say guard/center, depending on the team and what they need, they may view him better as a left guard, or they may view him better as a center in a zone blocking scheme. I bet you there are a couple of teams that when they're piecing together their draft boards right now have Jonathan Cooper rated higher because of his superior athleticism and foot speed to a Chance Warmack from Alabama. It does not necessarily guarantee and ensure that a Jonathan Cooper is going to get drafted ahead of a Chance Warmack, but you should not be incredibly surprised if that happens. And remember, it only takes one team to value one attribute that a player has over another to say we're going to take the guy that might have more upside over the guy that is a more proven commodity. In the case of Warmack from Alabama, you also have to keep in mind that teams are going to question not so much his skill sets, but the fact that he played on a line with guys like Fluker and a guy like Barrett Jones. And even though he was by far the superior talent of those three, they're going to look at it and say, is he the product of a good system? Is he a product of great talent surrounding him on the offensive line that allowed him to maximize what he could do well? And people are going to look at a Jonathan Cooper, again, like I said, viewing that superior athleticism and foot speed or quickness at the interior. And some teams are going to value Cooper over Warmack. And as a result, I would not be surprised if Cooper did get taken ahead of him. I would be slightly disappointed with teams because I want Cooper to drop to number 20 if it all happens, because I know that Bears organization would be too dumb to take a quarterback, even though they should. Anyways, Sylvester Williams. In this draft, I think it's pretty well established that the top 3 defensive tackles in some particular order are Sharif, Floyd, Star Lotulelei, and Sheldon Richardson. After that, there's like a big scrap, a big melee to figure out who's going to be that 4th defensive tackle. And in a draft where it's strong in offensive linemen, it's strong in defensive linemen, in particularly pass rushers, teams are always going to be looking for an interior pass rusher. And that's where a guy like Sylvester Williams, who I have mocked going number 23 to the Minnesota Vikings, could see his draft stock rise come draft day, where a guy like Jonathan Hankins could drop into the beginning portions or even the middle part of the 2nd round, because teams are going to view Sylvester Williams as a better athlete at the position and a better pass rusher who could cause more havoc in the interior of the defensive line. Justin Hunter, the wide receiver from Tennessee, Cordarrelle Patterson's teammate. When you look at Justin Hunter, this is an example here when I talk about the players between number 6 and number 26. Their talent levels are very, very similar. It's really hard to separate one from the other necessarily. It's a lot based off of perspective and what you look for. When you look at a Justin Hunter, he's a guy with prototypical size for the position. He has enough speed. He may be a superior route runner to his teammate Patterson. There are teams that are going to view him, as I view Justin Hunter, as a potential number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. And in a wide receiver class that has very good talent in it, might lack that one elite talent like an A.J. Green or a Justin Blackmon or a Des Bryant, but it has good talent throughout. You could see a guy, like a Justin Hunter, potentially move up the draft board ahead of somebody, let's say a Keenan Allen from California, because some teams may look at Keenan Allen and not view him as a number 1 wide receiver, but they view Justin Hunter as having more upside. And in a draft where there's talent, but it lacks marquee talent, teams are going to look again at athleticism and upside and playmaking ability, and that will win out more than it might in some other drafts. The last player is going to be John Cyprien, the safety from Florida International. God, I hope I pronounced the name right. What happens is you pretty much got it established that Kenny Vaccaro is going to be the number 1 safety taken in this draft, somewhere between pick 9 or 10 on down to probably no farther than 18 at the Cowboys. Now, I've got Vaccaro going 17 to the Steelers, but like I said, somewhere in that range between 9 to 18 is where Vaccaro's probably going to go. What happens is you're going to find another team in the back half of that 1st round that is going to be desperate for help at the safety position. When you look at last year's draft, you had Mark Barron go 7th overall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, what did that do? That kind of helped out Harrison Smith a lot, because he ended up having the Minnesota Vikings trade back up into the 1st round to take him. There's going to be at least 2 safeties drafted in this 1st round, and I feel a lot of teams are going to view the Cyprien kid from Florida International as the 2nd best safety in this draft. As a result, that's why I have him going as high as number 22 to St. Louis, because when you look at their team needs, they've drafted well last year. They've addressed some needs in free agency, the guys like Jared Cook and Jake Long especially. They need help at the safety position. With them already, in this case in my mock, getting Tavon Austin at 16, getting a needed playmaker at wide receiver, it wouldn't hurt for them to add something in the back half of that secondary to really help that defense, move up another notch in terms of the way it's viewed in NFL circles. So those are some of the names I think that you could see potentially rise and go in some surprising places by the time this April's NFL draft comes. That's Tavon Austin, Jonathan Cooper, Sylvester Williams, Justin Hunter, and Jonathan Cyprien. Like I said, next week I will have another mock draft up. It will probably be a 2-rounder. It will factor in trades, and it will probably focus more on what teams will do or would do, not as opposed to, in this case, what I thought each team should do.